Hello, everyone. Welcome back to All Beer Inside quarantine episodes. This episode, Noah, also known as Beerism.ca, is joining me for the conversation.
Hello.
Hi, thanks for joining us today here on the show.
No worries.
We usually have a beer together on the show. It's usually different beers, but we're actually having the same beer this time, from what I understand.
We are.
So my lighting's not great. There we go.
It's not great either. It's hard here in prison.
Four Origins, they were interview number 13 on the show, from what I recall.
That's true. You were with them, eh?
Yeah, I spoke with Keegan, and then eventually I spoke with Mike as well at the Cuvée, which is a fun festival in Quebec, which we also did media with. So,
nice.
As I say on the show, we do it virtually. A toast.
Toast.
Yeah. I've got my favorite local beer shop glassware here.
I'm a big fan of Pat at Multi Hops.
Mm-hmm.
I got my Four Origins going.
It's buried somewhere. I have thousands of beer glasses. So
yeah, I have too many as well.
It's an addiction.
Yep.
So I know it's on the website, but for those who aren't aware, those who are new viewers, what brought you to create the beerism.ca brand?
Well, I've been doing this for a while, so it's been almost a decade, 8 or 9 years at this point. It kind of started. I mean, I've been a beer fan my whole life, but I think like most of us, we before the craft beer boom, we all drank what we drank, which is just domestic, whatever imports. It's all the same. But then I started getting an interest in different types of imports that you could get out of Ontario that you can't get in Quebec, like English ales and stuff like that. My father-in-law actually kind of got me into that. So I started collecting those and trying different ones and getting into it. And then I started to appreciate the Quebec scene a bit. I had a bit of trouble at the beginning, I think, because it was very Belgian-centric. For some people, it's harder to get into it. And, you know, the phenolic thing, the really spicy profile, the high ABV, the sweetness, it becomes a bit more of an acquired taste, but one that once you get there, you fall in love with. So then I kind of went deep diving into the Quebec scene. And at the time, my partner was pregnant with my son, so I was going out less. I, just started developing more hobbies, and one of them just became beer. So from there, it started off as like just little Facebook posts on my personal page. Like I'd take a picture of a beer on my cutting board and just do these awful tasting notes when I look back at them. I mean, at the time, I guess they were fine. There wasn't much to compare it to because back then there were very few bloggers, and it was all Beer Advocate. And rate beer a little bit, but mostly Beer Advocate, so that kind of thing. And then from there, someone suggested that I start actually a blog. So because back then blogs were pretty popular, as now they're kind of phasing out with social media and everything. So I created beerism.ca. And in terms of the name, I actually had to think about it on the fly because I was like, oh, I'll think of the name later. But then the first step in creating a website is, establishing your domain. So it was actually my partner. She came up with it on a whim and went from there. And I mean, it's .ca instead of .com because I'm not paying 10 grand for beerism.com.
No.
Or whatever they're trying to charge for it.
Yeah, especially back then.
So it started. Yeah, exactly. So it started about eight or so years ago, and it's been steadily growing since. Seen a lot of people come and go over the years, and a lot's changed in the last 8 years. It seems like a lifetime ago, even though it's 8 years. It's not a huge amount of time. I mostly do kind of in-depth reviews, or even they definitely are reviews, but they're also just kind of explaining my perception of the beer. I don't like being too harsh, but I also don't want to sugarcoat it. I like giving critical reviews, but always respectful. That's kind of my key thing. Or like I want to point out what I don't like, but I want to do it in a way that one is clear that this is my opinion and it's not objectively bad, and two, I'm not an expert. I'm not trained. I've just been doing it a long time and I enjoy it. I've been doing less on the actual site these days and doing a bit more Instagram, Facebook pictures and stuff like that. One, because time and a little bit of laziness, because it's hard to come up with writing an article versus writing like a quick post is a very different thing, writing an article means, you know, it's like writing a paper. Like you're coming up with introduction, you have to have a theme, you're structuring it. Whereas in posts are a bit more straightforward and simple. And to be honest, like my page views have been going down steadily because people aren't going to websites much anymore.
Mhm.
But it's not to say I'm dropping it or anything. I've just been doing less full articles and more day-to-day, quick social media type reviews. And I've still concentrated a lot on the photography, obviously, because that's kind of become my thing a little bit, I think.
Yeah, the photography is absolutely beautiful. I don't know how that setup is, like what kind of screening, but a lot of people I've heard steadily compliment your photography for your Beerism website.
I really looked into that, to be perfectly honest. I think I've always had a little bit of an eye in the sense that you see a lot of people who just like pick up the phone and just snap whatever, you know. So even back when I was just taking phone photography, I still like setting up the shot a bit and making sure that I was taking daylight photos outside and not just like in my basement on a Friday night because it's just gonna look like trash no matter what. Because you can just do a lot with even just a cell phone and natural light outside. You can make a photo look decent. So I think I always had that perspective a little bit because even if you go back in my blog from like 6 years ago, you'll see like the photos aren't amazing, but they look okay.
Mhm.
And then went from that to honestly a friend just suggesting get a photo box. They're not that expensive, which is basically just a white box and you have two lights on either side. You set up a camera on a tripod and take a shot. And then I do a lot of post uh, editing though. That's kind of what makes them really pop. Like I go in and I take the label and I pull it out and I go and I make the blacks blackers and the colors more vibrant and I get rid of every little blemish. It's kind of become like a little obsession, you know, almost like an OCD thing where I'm like clicking everywhere. So I think that's why they end up popping a bit. But I don't honest to be perfectly honest, I don't know anything about photography. Like I'm not a photographer.
Okay.
I just have a little bit of an eye for it, and I think I've just created this setup, and that's why also you'll notice that I'm a one-trick pony, right? Like if you look at what pouring, like we were talking about before the start of this, if you're looking at what pouring perspective does, like she's clearly into photography, but like you don't see me on taking shots at breweries and stuff because honestly, I'm not a photographer. I might be able to take a decent shot, but I don't really know what I'm doing.
Yeah, no, I'm far from anything near professional photography. I picked up myself up one of those portable photo booth things, like the small little cardboard ones with two LED strips, and I take pictures, and I'm like, yeah, no, this is terrible, but I post it anyways because you need content, right? So
Yeah, for sure. My suggestion may be to get a bigger one because mine's actually like about 3-4 feet by 3-4 feet, and I find even that seems small at times.
mhm.
Because I think they try and trick you into buying these tiny little boxes, and they stick a beer in there, and you're like, well, I can see the sides of the box now. Like it's all so it's a bit. But yeah, I got a quite a large one, and I feel like that helped a lot.
Yeah, for sure. It's very very nice, and like you mentioned the post production or photo editing, it definitely helps pop. And even just the article about the lager beer, I had no idea that they were making like basically in a sense a giant label across 12
Yeah,
cans, and then you actually I found in the imaging just like popped out each can, and then finally you see that 12 can image, which is very impressive. It's very original for a brewer to come up with, and like you said, it's they wanted to do one every month, and you
yep,
mentioned like I preferred this one more than this one, and this is my palate.
yeah,
uh,
exactly.
we speak about that all the time on our audio show. Is one guy detests IPAs, he hates bitter beers and loves stouts, and one guy likes stouts but without the coffee. I'm like, well, that limits you because
Well, these days especially.
especially these days. Whereas I'll pretty much try everything. I'm a big proponent of hazy IPAs. I like the bitterness. I like the juiciness of them. So
Right.
that's me right now. But yesterday I was in a lager mood, so I had three lagers and then a goza to end the evening. So
Yeah, I mean, in terms of my preferences, I think like anyone, I fall victim to whatever like the trends like anybody else. I love juicy hazy IPAs. I'm digging the pastry stouts. I'm not on the fence with the smoothie thing, but it's anyway, that's its own thing. But I think and I get into arguments with my friends with a lot about this. I think I can also appreciate almost every style, because it's almost, I guess what my pet peeve is getting to the point where people are shitting on a beer, or almost as if almost for the style and not for like the quality of the beer, right? Like if they have this saison and it's not exciting enough because it's not incredibly sour, it doesn't taste like a Hill Farmstead saison or something. But I mean, like, it's a classic saison. This is how it's supposed to taste. It's still a solid beer and it's still enjoyable. It's as if it's not the most exciting thing, so then it's no longer a thing of quality. And I feel like it's a dangerous slippery slope when we start going down that route. Like the only, because if every brewery was Missorum, things would be pretty boring there too, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
enjoy their stuff. I like them. I like the guys. I love what they're doing. We actually needed a spot like that in Montreal. I think we were lacking it, but we don't want every brewery to be doing that either, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. Variety is the spice of life, obviously. And even Troy had mentioned it on my first episode with Troy. He's like, yeah, a guy had a wheat beer and he craps on it on Untappd. And his whole thing is, oh, I don't like wheat beers. Then don't
Exactly.
crap on something that you don't like. If you don't like it, don't have it. So,
Yeah, or have it and don't rate it.
yeah.
Like, yeah, I remember having conversations about that years ago. So are you familiar with Le Trois Mousquetaires?
Yes, I am.
So the old brewmaster there is Alex, and he worked there for like a decade, and then he left and he started Champ Libre.
Hmm.
And so I remember when he was still at Les Trois Mousquetaires, he had this series called was it Bière Exceptionnelle? Oh no, Baril Exceptionnel, or whatever it was. But it was basically like when he'd order these new barrels, sometimes there would be one or two or a few that were particularly interesting or different, or he landed one or two barrels that had a spirit in it that was where he could only land a couple of them. So he would do these really, really small batches with these really particular barrels. And the first time he did it, I think he made one of the best beers ever made in Quebec, which was like this bourbon barrel that was 30. The barrel was like 30 or 40 years old, and it was incredible. Like, I'd
Hmm.
never tasted anything like that. But anyway, all this to say, his third or fourth version of this was aged in Islay whiskey, or Islay whiskey, which is
Yeah, I
really
think it's his
peaty,
like.
right?
Hmm.
So he's like, "Oh, I can't wait for all the really terrible reviews on Untappd because people don't like smoke beers." But it's like, it's so funny, right? Because like, if you don't like smoke, why are you bashing it? Like, don't drink it, like you said, or don't rate it. Then just say like, this isn't for me. But it's just that weird thing in the beard world where we have to rate everything. Everything has to have a rating.
I mean, I'm guilty for rating, but I'm always very fair. If I don't like the beer, if I don't enjoy it, then I'll give it a lower rating. I just won't crap on it. And then,
Yeah,
I mean, I can't remember who mentioned it, but Untappd has helped them like see like why is this beer always getting 0.25, and then they did a massive recall because they realized there was something wrong with the quality
right,
control. So that also like as as beneficial, but at the same time as bad as Untappd is. Some of the brewers who pay attention to it realize, oh no, I made a mistake. Let's fix this.
for sure.
At least they admit to it. And like you mentioned, smoke beers. I never even tried a Gratzer, and then I think it was Church Key out of Ontario. They were at the Mondial, which we'll mention later about your thoughts on the Mondial.
Sure.
I tried them. Like it's like drinking a delicious campfire. And it was one of my first smoked beers. I'm like, I need more of these. But then the next one I had from another place, I'm like, oh, it's not as good. So did I get lucky with that first one and it's the best one? And then, it's a sliding scale, but I will give beer to me is like Pokemon. I got to try them all.
Yeah.
So,
Smoke beers are interesting because I wasn't a huge fan on them either, but there are so many different ways that you can make them, and there's so many different types of wood that you can use to smoke the beers that it drastically changes what the beer tastes like, coupled with whatever that style is, right? Like a Gratzer, doesn't taste anything like a Rauch beer. Like a Rauch beer tastes like a bacon, sweet bacon thing, and I don't really like them. I can't say that I've had many, so there could be higher quality ones or really amazing ones out there that I might like. But I've had a few Greitzers. Harry Hanna did a whole line, like Francis Richer, who's the head brewer there. He really digs smoked beers, and he did 3 of them, aged in 3 different barrels. One of them contained seaweed, which was such a weird combination, and they were all fantastic, and I liked them a lot. And then again, going back to the Islay thing, the peaty whiskey, that adds such an interesting component to a beer in a very different way than a Rausch beer or a Gratzer, like you're saying. So I think it's possible to dislike some smoked beers and then like others, dependent on like where how that smoke's getting infused, what kind of wood, because the wood in a Gratzer I think is a different type of wood than you'd use to smoke like a Rausch beer or whatever. And I've only recently learned this, and it helped me kind of like, oh, okay, so like smoky and sour can be pretty good if it's kind of like this, but I don't like if it's like that. So yeah, to your point, try them all, because if you think you don't like it, maybe you will in the next one.
For the website, where did that inspiration and style come from?
You know, the site itself is a template that I chose. I like the idea of it being kind of clean and just showcasing the photos more than anything. Honestly, I'd like to do a complete overhaul. I just haven't found the time. Like, because I've had that same template for 6 years now. It needs a complete overhaul. But and again, in terms of the visual component, you know, I'm a bit of a one trick pony with the black background. I kind of I like consistency, I think, maybe at a subconscious level or something. Like I like the idea of it always kind of looking the same with a subtle difference or whatever. And I think it's kind of helped me, because if someone sees one of my photos, they tend to know it's mine, you know. And a lot of breweries really like my photos, so they'll share them too. And then like it kind of creates my brand in a way without having to actually do anything. And in terms of writing, I guess, like again, talking about the early days of when I first started, it was all beer advocate ratings. And I remember just like every time I went to the grocery store, picked up a new beer, I would be on beer advocate looking at the rating or what it got or what people were saying about it. And I think it kind of started as that, you know, separating the review into the appearance, the nose, the palate, and the mouthfeel or whatever, and then breaking that down in more of a, you know, writing in more of the form of a paragraph than like point form or whatever. And that kind of became the basis of the blog posts, having something to say. Sometimes I'd have to search for something to say because I would receive a package, or I would just go out and buy like a set of beers that had a certain theme, and then just talk about that brewery or that beer style or that thing that I was doing. Maybe I'm doing a vertical of a various different vintages of the same beer, or maybe just different versions of the same beer, like a horizontal type thing, and then just talking about that process. Sometimes I would host little events and and then write about those. I tend to write them in the form of an essay and then break down each beer individually. And I imagine for some readers it can be a bit laborious. Like if you were talking before about looking at my top 13 or whatever, I mean that's a huge article. I hope people just take that article and read what they want and leave the rest. Like I don't want people to have to like sit there and like, all right, here he goes again. Another one, another one. All right, I get it. Notes of this and whatever. So like, but yeah, I've always started with that kind of intro and just talking about something, and then just moving on to those individual beers and like really breaking down my tasting notes on that.
Your palate, where did you like? I find it's pretty refined from what I'm reading. So where did that palate come from?
Just time, really. I realized quick that if you start writing things down, then you'll end up training yourself. And I think it's like that with anything. Whether or not you wake up every morning and write down your dream from the night before, you start remembering your dreams more, right? It's kind of I feel like it's kind of the same thing with beer. If you're smelling and writing down what you're smelling, and you're tasting and you write down what you're tasting, you're gonna over time probably start picking things out more. And it's a combination of that and general interest. You're like, okay, well, I keep smelling clove or something or whatever that is, and then trying to understand what's causing that thing. So like, okay, well, all right, clove, what's that? I do a bit of research. Oh, okay, those are phenols. What kind of beer styles have these aromatics, right? Okay, more Belgian stuff or more German wheat beers, stuff like that. Okay, well, what? And then just like going down that rabbit hole a little bit, and then just understanding, and then just drinking a lot and tasting a lot and finding that commonality, making that connection, and then from there that coupled with whatever your personal preference is. Right? If you like beers to be drier, if you like beers to be sweeter or whatever, and then like shaping your palate around that. But yeah, I say definitely just if anyone wants to refine their palate, writing down what you're tasting is key, even if it's just notes on your phone. But I would suggest don't do it all the time. Enjoy the beer some of the time, because I have friends who I'm not on Untappd. I've never
Yeah.
dived into Untappd. It's not. I think it started with I just never did, and then I just still haven't. I don't have anything against Untappd. I don't have anything against rating, even though I went on a little bit of rant before. I'm fine with it, and it's helped me a lot over the years. But I feel like if you obsessively have to go on there for every single beer that you drink, then it kind of removes the experience. Because I'm kind of like, I think both extremes. So either I'm sitting down like 20 minutes with this thing and like taking extensive notes and doing a photo and having to do fucking post editing too, or like nothing. Like I'm just sitting there, I'm drinking the beer, I'm not thinking about it, So I think that balance is key for me, because if I had to do that for every single beer, I'd shoot myself.
I'm not so much as a describer, but I am very guilty of checking in a lot of my beers because I want to know, like, I want to recall what I enjoyed. And it's like, oh,
For
I
sure,
gave
and that makes
this,
sense.
yeah. So I gave this style, like, there was this specific beer a 5, 4.75, 4.5. So for my example, Old Tomorrow's Monty's Age Ride Ale. It's one of my favorite beers I've ever had coming out of Ontario. And it's like got a caramel with a bit of wryness to it. It's very nice. And so the first time I had one, I'm like, oh man, I got to go back, but it's a seasonal. Oh, it's sold out. So then the next year, go back to the LCBO. Oh, we've only got 12, and now you have 0 because I'm buying them all. And then I'll sit there and drink them as many as I can. They're 6%, so they give it a nice little kick in the butt at the end of the night. But it's a fantastic beer, but that's my style. Whereas I have a friend who absolutely hated it, but he also doesn't like rye. So I'm like, okay, well that makes sense to me then.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but
It's
yeah,
like
I'm
rye, the grain, or rye is in the spirit.
the spirit.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. You get a bit of the. It's aged in rye barrels, so you get that carameliness to it. It's very like I love the beer, but some people don't. And it wasn't Untappd, but Untappd helped me remember that beer a year later, like going like, oh yeah, that's the one I wanted. And then I
Right.
grabbed a quick 12 pack. So, and a 12
Nice.
pack of that at $4.50 a can's not a cheap day.
No, but
So,
it's still better than that's substantially cheaper than most IPAs these
yeah,
days, right?
for sure.
It's
Uh,
$6.99.
yeah, 100%. I understand these guys have to make profit, but at the same time, they're keeping it realistically. For a premium product, I feel that they're keeping it realistic most of the time.
Yeah, I think so too. And maybe it's helping people drink a bit less, or it's making people more poor. One of the
Yeah, well, I know that was a big thing when Benelux came to Verdun because Verdun was always a poorer neighborhood,
Yeah.
and somebody on welfare is not spending $8 on a pint. It's not happening.
No, exactly. I think the good thing about bars, so like it seems insane that buying a can of beer could be $6.99 plus tax plus deposit, but if you walk into a bar and pay that price for a pint, that seems more than reasonable compared to like when 15 years ago when I spent too much time at places like Hurley's ordering $8 or $9 pints of Guinness. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Like the fact that you can get the quality and beer these days at less than that price, then I think that's more than reasonable. And like you said, in Verdun, um, it's been gentrified so much in the last decade, but even the pints at Benelux are still pretty reasonably priced.
Yeah, no, and Tico's a great guy. I've met him a bunch. Like I met him a
Yeah,
couple times
Tico.
prior to the show, and then we finally got to interview him. And he's super chill dude. So I was there for the can release of the Sold Out as well. It was a good day. So I'm enjoying beers with the like. That's why I love a lot of speaking to guys like yourselves and ladies like Ashley. And anybody in the brewing industry, like I love talking about the passion behind what this is.
Yeah,
And
for
my
sure.
passion is to kind of get your passion out there. So that's what I enjoy. Do you brew yourself at all?
No. want to one day, but kind of as I was explaining before, I kind of started all this right when I was about to have my first child. So money's been tight. We have bought a house, we have 2 cars, like mortgage, everything, right?
Yeah.
So like, not. I mean, it's mostly a time thing, I think, than a money thing, because like putting the time and effort into learning and trial and error and all the equipment and where to do it, and I never did. But I'd like to, because it's what I should be doing, right? It's like being a food reviewer that doesn't cook. It's a weird thing. It's a bit different, obviously, but sometimes it feels like that a bit. Um, I've been in a lot of breweries and I've done a few collaborations with
Okay.
brewers, but I don't brew myself.
What are those? What are some of those breweries you've collabed with?
My first one was a couple of summers ago with Sutton. Do you know
Hmm.
Brewery Sutton?
Yeah, I know the brewery. I don't. They haven't been on the show yet there, so but I know of them. I know of a majority of Quebec microbreweries. I think Robin is the only one I wasn't aware of until I read your article. So
Oh, well, I'm
yeah,
glad that you're aware of them now,
yeah.
because Robin is killing it. They're doing some amazing
Like,
stuff right now.
I mean, I've only ever had one Oval beer because they're impossible to track down. I find.
Yeah. Well, if we ever have a beer, I'll bring you some Oval. Um, but yeah, so the collaboration I did with Sutton was, I've known Pat for a few years. Pat's the co-owner and head brewer. And so I don't know if you know Sutton, but they do. He brews his beers, every single beer, with Brett, right? So every one of his beers has wild. For those who don't know, Brett is short for Brettanomyces, and it is a wild yeast strain. And most of the time, you see that wild yeast strain in a more of like a secondary fermentation type
Mhm.
process, where either whether you're talking something like lambic or you're talking about a breaded saison or something like that. Usually, it's more of a secondary fermentation, which gives it like a horsier, mustier, just that Brett funk thing.
Yep.
But he's kind of like this master with that yeast, and he brews all of his beers, and a lot of them are primary, 100% Brett and primary fermentation Brett, which completely changes the way that the yeast tastes. Ultimately, it's still an aggressive yeast strain in the sense that it removes so much of the sugar, and the beers tend to be drier. But but instead of imparting this like dusty funk, it imparts more of just a gentle fruitiness and an overall drier profile. So I've been in love with what he does, and before that he worked at Dunham. He was
Mhm.
like under Eloa at Dunham and them, so he learned everything that he could from them, because those guys are a bunch of geniuses. Um, and so anyway, all this to say, it started with do you remember Brut IPAs?
Brute. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
so they
it's.
were they were a thing, and then they're less of a thing now, but they're still a thing.
I enjoy them
So
for what they are
Oh, I do
personally. So
too. I like the idea. It's interesting how that whole thing came about, because it was just kind of like, it really showcased how social media shapes things and how things spread so quickly now. So basically, like this brewery in California created this new style, and within weeks people were brewing it all over the world. And for those who don't know, Brewed IPA is basically an IPA that's ultra clear, super easy drinking, insanely dry. And how they get it super dry is they throw in an enzyme that helps break down the sugars and lets the yeast really go to town on those sugars, to the point where you end up with like a literally zero or less than 0% um, of, of of sweetness or sugars left in the beer.
mhm.
So I'd read a couple of articles. People were just starting to talk about it. So I messaged Pat. I'm like, here, read this article, because what you do with Brett is kind of similar to what they're doing with these IPAs. Because he brews a bunch of he brews IPAs in Sutton, but he uses Brett, and it cuts down that sweetness. He's like, oh, this is great. Come brew with me. I was like, all right, let's do it. So me and a buddy who was a brewer, a friend of mine, asked him if he wanted to come. We went together, and it's an awesome night. We drank all night, then woke up and brewed all day, terribly hungover. And ultimately, it was called Brett Never Sleeps. They often have it at multi hops.
Okay.
Yeah, and the name kind of came from we were drinking, and he was telling that he's a really charismatic dude. So I highly recommend getting him on the podcast.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. Anyway, like he's a lot of fun. Sorry, my daughter just walked into the room.
Hello.
So so we called it Brett Never Sleeps. It was the first bottle they ever did in 750s,
Mhm.
and I'm not tuning my own horn because I did virtually nothing to brew the beer, but I loved it. It was just kind of perfection for me. It really like nailed what he does perfectly, which is just creating something that's subtle but really complex, super easy to drink. Like it was a 7% beer, but it drank like water, and it had a sweetness to it, even though it literally had no sugar left in it.
Yeah, almost like a zero Play-Doh in the end. What do you?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, no, I'll have to check that out. So
Yeah.
these are obviously some of your favorite beers. What would be like your kind of uh, top 3 breweries that you generally go to? Let's say for 100%, I'm getting beer from here this weekend.
Well, that's a tough one. I think number one is probably JCL. Um, they're just so well rounded. They brew some of the best beers in the world. I mean, Peche Mortel is the same beer it was. I mean, besides minor tweaks,
Mm-hmm.
like 15 or 20 years ago. I don't even know how old it is at this point, and it's still probably the best stout, one of the best stouts in the country. Like it's surpassed all the trends. As much as I like these new pastry stouts, like Ball Canada stuff is killer, Peche still wins it, right? And bourbon Peche is just on another level. But they also, it's a combination of things. Their price point is brilliant. They still do bottles and they still do 4-packs, and the 4-packs are like $10
Mm-hmm.
or $11 or $12 or whatever. And they do simple beers perfectly, like Saison Spark, which just came back this year, is one of my favorite beers of all time. It's basically the only brewery that I consistently buy beer from every month. Like I'll go to my store and I'll buy whatever 4-pack that is. And I also collect them because I was mentioning this earlier, but I like doing verticals and stuff. So like they have a lot of high ABV beers. So things like a Seki Nicho or a Grand Noissar or Peche or whatever, or a lot of the momentums that come out every month, I'll go and I'll buy a 4-pack and I'll put it in the cellar. And then after 10 years, I do a 10-year vertical or whatever, or after 5 years. I've done a few of those. They're a lot of fun. But aside from that, I mean, it's so hard to create a top 3. I mean, Dunham, I think, has earned a spot in that too. Just their ability to wield wild yeast and mixed fermentation. Like their barrel program is fantastic. They one of the first in the province to really start nailing the whole barrel aged Brett saison and that kind of thing, and almost like created that genre in the province. That
Mm-hmm.
people like Robin are now taking advantage of that, of what they kind of put forward to begin with. Like I enjoy the new trends of like what Masorum is doing. I'm a big fan of Buck Canada. I really love those guys. I do their photography, so I'm usually well equipped with Buck Canada beers. I've had a bit of Sir John and Wood Brothers. All the Wood Brothers is in Quebec, but they almost seem like they
Yeah,
are Quebec because
I
they're
know.
just right there. So I enjoy the new stuff too. I don't know who I'd give my third, but there's so many, right?
Yeah,
There's just so many. It's
yeah.
hard.
We are pretty lucky here in Quebec. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Plus, we have so usually my next question is beercation. So, for example, like we live in Quebec, we have Ontario to the left of us, and Vermont to the south of us,
Right.
Maine to the south right of us. What are some of your beercations that you've enjoyed?
Unfortunately, not many,
Okay.
or any really, to be perfectly honest. So, like I
Okay.
was saying before, the real passion started when I started having kids, and then when that becomes the priority. Um, if I could, my
Hmm.
dream would probably be to go to Belgium. I mean,
Okay.
Lambic is probably my most favorite thing to enjoy, and to be able to go to like that area of the world would be spectacular.
Yeah. I've always wanted to kind of hang out with the Trappist monk and have a few beers at a monastery. I always thought that'd be entertaining after,
Yeah.
you know, when we can safely again, obviously.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. And that's actually a really good thing to bring up because I feel like the Trappist beers for many of us. I mean, I saw some pictures of you back, a while ago, so you're not brand new to beer, but I'm sure you remember at a time when Trappist beers were like the hippest, coolest, most sought after thing, right?
mhm.
Like West Vleteren 12, the rarest beer in the world that everyone wanted to get their hands off. So like those beers really paved the way in a lot of ways to what we're at now. They're not people don't seem to like them at all anymore. Um, but I'm sure that'll just come full circle. I mean, sorry, I won't say people don't like them anymore, but they're not trendy anymore. People aren't getting excited over quads. That's for sure.
Yeah. Me and my friends have discussed that. Like, what do we think maybe the future of beer is? And mine is what's old is going to become new again.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's cyclical. Eventually, it's going to come back.
We
Uh,
saw that with barley wines. I mean, I was huge into barley wines years ago, and then they kind of fell off. And in the last couple of years, probably largely in part to I don't know if you know the blogger, podcaster, writer Don't Drink Beer, but he almost like brought it back with his
okay.
like whole thing. Like he kind of just started this movement called BIL, barley wine is life, and it was all tongue in cheek and like total satire, but then not, and you don't know what he's doing that's satire and what he's doing that's not. And he kind of like, I feel like he single-handedly almost brought back barley wine as being like a trendy thing again. It's kind of interesting.
Because I mean, barley wine is not the type that you're going to sit down and have like 2-3 pints. You're going to be on the floor after too many pints of barley wine. You're talking a beer that's at least anywhere from 9% and above. It's
Yeah, 9 to 15,
barley
easy
wines are to me, that's a sipping beer.
for sure.
So I personally still have one bottle of Hell's Gate from Kanawaki that I've been aging. So
Yeah.
I've already told my friends, I'm like, when we get the all clear, this is what we're getting together and enjoying. Is
Have you experimented much with aging?
No, I just did with a couple of months ago after I interviewed Tico. He passed me a 2018 and then a 2019 of the Armada or Grand Armada. And yeah, I totally get the different tastes of each one. Uh,
Yeah, that's a good one actually
yeah.
to sit on. I've done that one a few times with some time on it. It's a fun exercise. It's one that unfortunately is often not a positive experience because I feel like half the time it fails. But it is fun to see. I feel like you learn a lot from it. When we were talking before about how do you get your palate where you want it to be or whatever. And I feel like aging beer helps you understand that. You definitely get that with IPAs just by the fact that you're like, oh crap, I forgot this was in my fridge and now it's 2 months old and it's a shadow of what it once
Mm,
was, or it's not even drinkable.
yeah.
So you see that oxidation in a short period of time with something like an IPA, but it's also a lot of fun to see how the beer changes when you're talking something that actually ages well and with a couple of years on it. Yeah.
Yeah, because I only recently started that. So I was at the LCBO in Hawkesbury a couple of weeks back because I was visiting family out in that range, and I picked up 2 bottles of from Nickelbrook, 2 bottles of Kentucky Bastard, two bottles of Cafe, and 2 bottles of their other one. One I've already slapped a label on it saying 2020, and now it's sitting upright. And then
Nice.
the one I'm going to have this year is in the fridge for later on at another consumption date. So I do want to eventually next year or the year after have year 1, year 2, year 3 to see how those age. And with them having thankfully the wax top, I'm not too worried about too much oxygen getting in to ruin the beer at that point. So
Yeah, those age well. The coffee can often be, or adjuncts in general can cause problems, but that I've had that particular beer with a few years on it and does well. But it'll be fun to see how the coffee changes, right? Because when coffee is fresh in a beer, it it tastes very, I don't know, vibrant. Like you
yeah,
get the coffee, and then over time it starts fading. But then over more time, it starts getting sometimes vegetal, like earthy
Okay.
and weird,
Mm-hmm.
like almost like green peppery a little bit, if that makes sense. So, and that's what I mean too about like, oh, well, I aged this for 2 years and I'm getting this now. I'm getting this now. I don't like that or whatever. But then you're like, oh, I do like that. I think most beer is better fresh, to be perfectly honest,
Yes.
if not all beer. But I unfortunately still obsessively collect and have hundreds and hundreds of bottles in my cellar. It's bad,
Yeah, I've been
but
reading a
fun.
lot online because the quarantine people are cracking open their cellars when they haven't wanted to, but it's just like, oh, my local brewery is not doing this right now and that, so I'm gonna open my 2015.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Well, now I got my 2016. So
yeah, and I mean, and we should be because we're basically just leaving all these beers to die in our cellar a lot of the time. I think I wouldn't recommend my approach because it's kind of absurd, but it's fun to just see the progression of a beer over time, and not to pitch Jid Seal just so much, but the format of the size of those bottles, and they have some kind of magic spell with beers that like they oxidize really slowly, even though they're in three like beers oxidize quicker, and if they're in a smaller format, and those are very small formats. Two, they have twist tops, which aren't the best seal, but their beers age better than pretty much any beers I've ever had. So who knows? And at like $10 for a 4 pack, you just go and buy their high ABV beers every year, throw one or two in the cellar, and then after 5 years, you can do like a 5 year vertical. And at that format size, you can do it with like two or three friends, and it's not like you have to dump a ton of beer because you do those with 750s. You need like 20 friends, and it's a lot more challenging.
yeah, usually if it's a 750, I bought one of those little like plastic cork topper things.
Yeah,
So if I am doing a tasting with friends, then they'll go on to whatever beers they're going to drink afterwards, and I'll just finish my aged beer or
that's a
whatever
good
beer
idea.
I bought there. Yeah, like I even got the Glory and Gold, so I'm going to let those all age at least a year or two, and then I'll go from there with Nickelbrook. This is my
Yeah.
first time experimenting, even though I've been drinking crafts for 12 years now because the Mondial, that's where it started. And I read in one of your articles, I'm even agreeing it. Mondial going back to Windsor, I disagree with. I thought they
Mm,
could have made it bigger and better, kind of like your Great American Beer Fest,
right,
but
exactly.
they're regressing. So I don't get that. What are your kind of thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't know a lot of the politics around Mondial or what they're doing, so I can't say firsthand that I know exactly what the situation is, but it does seem to me that they kind of screw over the brewers, which is why they lose more and more every year. I remember going, I feel like the probably the prime might have been like 5, 6 years ago when you had like Hopfenstart there and Dunham there and everybody almost that was in Quebec, and now there's no one. You have like the last time I went, it was like 90% contra. It was all Oshlag. It was basically everyone at Oshlag, and I think Four Origins was there. And I was talking to Mike. He's like, I don't think we're gonna do this again. Like
Yeah.
I heard that they don't pay their people until like months and months. Sorry, like because I think they pay their way in and then Mondial pays them back based on how many tickets they sold or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And it could take like 6 months for them to see $1 of it. So I think most brewers have just left. They're like, screw this. I don't need this. And it's too bad because it's in fucking Montreal. So you have
Yeah.
people like Dunham who are like, screw this. I'm gonna go to Boston or whatever and go there because I don't know, maybe they're getting treated better and we have this homegrown one of the largest beer festivals in the world that can't even showcase local talent. It's kind of sad, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I've become a bigger fan of Laval recently, even though it's kind of out of my way, and I do not drink and drive. It's
Right.
even though like funny story, I've said it on the audio. So I was drinking at a friend's house. I left my car there overnight, and it was involved in a hit and run. A drunk driver, smashed my car when I did
Wow.
the responsible thing. So I joke around all the time. I'm like, that's it. I'm drinking and driving from now on.
Maybe
uh,
you won't get an accident.
yeah, maybe exactly. So, but I'm a big fan of the Valley, even though it's a little inconvenient living in Verdun, getting there. But
Yeah, I heard it was good.
outdoors,
I haven't been.
yeah, super fun. I've been all 5 years, but everything we're on a year delay. That's the way I look at it. And I'm sure it's going to come back bigger and better. Chambly for me is too many people, but it's also like that focuses on Quebec. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
And I'm unfortunately guilty of attending very few of these. Again, I don't leave the house much. I without getting all into it, I work. We were talking about it before, but I work downtown. I have a crazy commute every day. So I get to see my kids like an hour or two every night. So the weekends I kind of dedicate to them. So that's why I don't make it out to events much. I'm sure that'll change in the next few years as they get older and stuff.
For sure.
Or if I don't know, somehow one day I can work from home, then I'll need to escape on the weekends. So yeah, I've never actually been to Chambly, even though it's like the biggest, the oldest, and probably the most important beer festival. I've been to like Oktoberfest and Repentigny a couple of times. I think I went to Laval for the first one, where it was like a joke. Like I remember it was in like it felt like a gymnasium. There was like 8 booths, and it was just locals like knowing nothing about the beers and like, you want to try this? But I know that's grown into a really impressive festival at this point.
Yeah, it's nice. It's outdoors. There's a kids area. They got the bouncy castles and all that stuff. They have concerts with local Quebec artists. Repentigny as well was the first time I went. This past year was the first time I'd went. So another thing, like STM out there, it takes a while, but
yeah,
I have fun. I enjoy myself. I take my time, but I also make sure I can get back to Montreal without having to spend $100 on a taxi. So
yeah, that's it. And I guess if you share that with like 3 of your pals, it's not so bad if you all live in the same region. But yeah, if you're on your own, then that's tough.
Yeah, for sure. Perfect. So let everybody know where they can find you. Instagram, all the ats, the website, and all that stuff.
Website's beerism.ca, not .com, because I can't afford the .com. Instagram is also beerism.ca, at beerism.ca. And Facebook, just search Beerism, and that's me. And Twitter, don't bother.
Perfect. And I'm going to add all that in the show notes. So you just click on the link on the show notes at the bottom of the end. I'm hoping to post the audio portion of this on the website. That's
Cool.
my own part, so I'm bad with that. As for us, allbeerinside.com. Fortunately, it wasn't that expensive because nobody wants that name. We're at All Beer Inside everywhere. And as I say, when you're on allbeerinside.com, on the right-hand side of the page, there is an amazon.ca link that helps me buy equipment for the show, to make production better and stuff. And Jeff Bezos has a lot of money already. Why not give some of his money to our show? It helps us out a lot, especially amazon.ca shopping. You can find our frequently infrequent allbeerinside.com audio show on iTunes and Stitcher, I believe. That should be getting fixed. And as I like to say at the end of every episode, drink craft, not crap. Cool. Thanks a lot, Noah. Really appreciate
Have a good
this.
one. Take care.